You're listening to episode 47 of the Confident Writer podcast with Jane Pike. Hello, glorious one. How goes it out there today? I'm sitting in my office and it is looking a little bit grey outside. It's raining, so if you hear some background raindrops on the roof, that is just part of the atmosphere coming to you via the podcast today. I've been reflecting over the past little while, which has been a little bit bonkers, I'm sure you will admit. And I think, the adrenaline, that initial shock and adrenaline has worn off to some extent. And this is where we're playing the long game. But I think, for me personally at least, I'm noticing that I'm settling into a new kind of routine. I'm used to working by myself, for instance, and that has definitely not been happening. I had to request, actually, that no little people were streaking up the garden and into my office while I was recording this. My usual little sanctuary is Legoland now. There's a variety of different structures in the background. But one of the things that I'm noticing that I actually think is really good for me, and maybe some of you will fall into this category as well, is that I've become much more flexible about how things look. And I think this is part of our ongoing relationship with time and our ability to negotiate time. But I know previously, and I'm not talking about just previously to the situation that we're finding ourselves in now, certainly previous to having children. So this has kind of been like an ongoing process, I guess. But I used to wait for big chunks of time rather, to open up in the day in order for me to think I was able to do something. So if I wanted to write an article, for instance, I'd wait for the space to arise. If I wanted to get out there and work my horse, I would wait for the space to arise. And what I know is that time does not make itself available to you. You have to actually seek it out and grab it. And I guess the relationship that I've been developing with time is trying to expand it, but also recognizing that I have to carve out spaces of time in order to fill them with things that are important to me. That process has led me to be really intentional with where it is I invest my energy, and also to understand what the highest and best use of my time is. So if you were to ask me how I like to spend my time, or where the use of my time is most important, I could answer you straight away, because I know what that looks like. I know what the things are that fill me up. I know where it is I want to invest myself for the highest benefit of everyone, I hope, not just myself. But then again, the circumstances change. We need to be chameleons. And now, once more, I'm finding myself called to move with an even greater flexibility, meaning that I cannot have the usual space, or I do not have, like so many of us right now, I do not have the usual space available to me to do the stuff that I want to do. And I've realized that I'm actually much more adept at multitasking when absolutely necessary than I thought I was. For instance, a lot of my working day, the boys are with me. I have them in the office. They're, like I say, they're doing Lego, or they're reading books, or they're arguing, or they're vying for my attention. Perhaps those two last things I mentioned, I should pop at the first part of the list. But, it's just a very imperfect scenario in terms of what we need, what we think we need in order to produce concentrated work. Once again, not the ideal, but the situation right now, that's the realness of the situation. And what I've noticed is that I'm actually able to maintain a pretty high level of productivity if I dedicate myself to making that happen within the imperfectness and within the myriad of distractions that are available to me. It's a definition that is constantly asking to be made new, in that now I consider work, the solitary work that I need to do, to be things like recording this podcast, or recording meditations and visualizations and kind of the audio content for Joyride. Those are things that I really don't need an audience for, a little people audience. So I carve out, when I have those very precious time blocks, that's what I'm dedicating my time to. The other thing with my horses, and I'm in the very fortunate position of being able to be at home with my horses right now, there's a lot of stuff which previously I would have kind of slunk off and done by myself. I like working them, like feeding them, those really precious pockets of time which are necessary for our headspace, but we have to be a little bit more resilient right now. We have to be a little bit more flexible right now. And that doesn't mean not making those pockets of time for yourself to restore your headspace. I think probably that's more prevalent and necessary now than ever. However, I think what I'm trying to say is I'm recognizing that there's a lot more that I can do in very imperfect situations. Whereas before, my mindset might have been much more fixed about needing to be alone or needing for this particular environmental circumstance to open up before a particular thing gets done. Now I know I can watch that tutorial and my kids can be in the background. I can work my horses and I can have family there with me, and I can work, and that can be a very imperfect situation, and it doesn't influence the amount of productivity or the output, I guess. So yeah, it's a very personal musing. Maybe you guys will be able to resonate with it, maybe not. And within that, I also understand that if the pressure builds up, I'm going to have to recognize that some days we're just going to be doing less, that we have to really define now more than ever what our top priorities are, so that when the time is there, we're able to fulfill those, and everything else that gets done around that is a bonus. This is totally not what I had planned to talk about at the start of this episode, but that's something that I noticed coming up. And what I want to throw in, or what I want to chatter about with you today, are 5 unlikely ways that you can practice right now that will actually have a really constructive or positive benefit to your riding, even if you're not able to be with your horse right now, even if you're not riding right now. The ways that we are able to manage our minds and hearts are absolutely going to come into effect in the future. One of the questions I get asked every now and then for Joyride is, I'm not riding currently, or maybe there's a situation where I've been injured and I'm in recovery and so I'm not working with my horse, or, it's imperfect situations where we think maybe the skills that I teach won't be as relevant or able to be applied because we're not in a situation where we're riding or something to that effect. And what I always say is, where you're at now is the perfect place to begin managing those things, managing and cultivating a mindset that is supportive of where you want to take things. Because these processes, the processes of cultivating confidence, of manifesting confidence, of really being able to bring yourself back to a safe place in terms of if you notice your nervous system going into an activated mode that represents fight, flight, or freeze, we need these tools. We need these tools to be able to manage ourselves on a daily basis. And when we're in situations where the pressure is on, so say for instance, at the moment you are or have been experiencing a high level of anxiety in your riding, the place that we begin working with that is actually away from your horse, because we want to have skills to be able to take to situations where the pressure comes on, so that we're not automatically defaulting to the ways that we knew previously. So if we tend to abort mission, if we tend to freeze up, if we tend to, respond in a way that isn't conducive or helpful to either ourselves or our horses, we want to experience little versions of that, like drip feed moments where we're able to experience the uncomfortable emotion that we're wanting to work with, and then apply skills that actually allow us to bring ourselves back down. You don't want to go to the highest activation point when you're learning something new. So if you're fearful or anxious, we don't want to put you in the path of the highest version of that you can pinpoint right now. That is not the place to begin. The place to begin is by saying, okay, where can we experience a tiny piece of that so that you can practice the emotional agility to be able to adjust yourself back and forth as needed. So the first thing is really recognizing that now is a great time to practice dealing with your emotions. What we are in the midst of is a situation where generally there is a high amount of fear, there's a high amount of anxiety and concern that is part of our collective mindset. And it's incredibly amplified. It's amplified for good reason, but it's also amplified to the extent where it's very easy for us to become immobilized by the situation. Now, what our tendencies have been prior, so if we have primed ourselves rather to be operating from an anxious mindset, if we become very practiced at dancing with fear in a way that isn't useful to us, then those tendencies will be amplified also. Everyone is operating from a start point, right? Everyone has a baseline that they're operating from. And the more stable your baseline is prior to being triggered or activated, that will immediately dictate how it is you are going to respond after. So if you've come into this situation already feeling quite anxious, already feeling quite fearful as a way that you kind of move through life, that is going to be amplified tenfold. If you've come into this situation feeling relatively relaxed and balanced, it's not that you are immune from those experiences, but what we recognize is that you're going to be able to bring yourself back down to a more centered place much more easily than if your start point was one of that where you were already experiencing a high charge. One thing that I was talking about in the clinics that I just taught in Australia was the understanding that the amount of tension you enter into a situation with is directly proportional to the amount of reactivity that you respond to an event with. Meaning that if your horse spooks and you find yourself in that startle response, if you find yourself getting startled by your horse spooking, then how quickly you're able to relax and reset, that is determined by how relaxed you were coming into that experience. So if you're already going out there and working your horse and the baseline is one of apprehension and concern, it's very easy to go to a place where you cycle well above yourself and feel yourself getting to a kind of out of control place because you've already come in with a cup that is 3/4 full. And it's the same here. This situation, this global situation, yes, there are very specific concerns that I'm not trying to override or diminish in any way. But if you had a practice already of sustaining nervous system calm, of being able to manage your mind and recognize the thoughts and stories and patterns that are unhelpful to you, you are in a better place to be able to deal with what presents in your current reality. The opportunity then is to say, okay, I am in a situation now where I can recognize what it is I came into this situation with. I know what my baseline is. So if we were to score ourselves prior to this happening from 0 to 10, with 0 being, well, maybe 0 is kind of like inanimate, but 1, let's start at 1. 1 being, I was pretty relaxed, I was pretty centered, I felt like I could bring myself back to calm pretty easily. You will most likely be bobbing in the surf as opposed to being slammed down by the wave. If your tendency was, I was already in an anxious place, I know that when I'm imbalanced, I go to that place really easily, my tendency or my superpower is to become anxious, then most likely you're really struggling with this because it is the tipping point that kind of sends you over. What we know about anxiety is that it is a future-focused thought. Anxiety is us, in our mind, going to a future place where we are looking at all the different scenarios that are possible for us. And in the case of anxiety, they aren't good. We're looking at all the future scenarios, which tend to be the worst case scenarios that we can entertain for the position that we're in. Now, the thing about our nervous system, and this is the quote that you may have heard before, neurons that fire together wire together, meaning that the more that we think in a particular way, or the more that we think a particular thought, the easier it is to default to that thought pathway. What that tells us is that if you think anxious thoughts a lot, you prime your neurology for anxious thinking. You essentially become very good at being anxious. And that becomes a habitual response that we enter into in the face of any destabilizing force on the outside. That destabilizing force might be your horse. That destabilizing force might be a certain event or circumstance that's very familiar to you in the normal, quote unquote, day-to-day life. But right now, what we know is that that tendency is more heightened generally. And so what you will have experienced previously is also amplified. If you started at a base level of 1, that is going to be amplified to a 3 or a 4 now. If you started with a baseline of 7 or 8, potentially that's going to be amplified to an 11 or 12 now. So you can see that we are only really experiencing an amplification of what was already there for us previously. And how quickly we can come back is also indicative of where our baseline was or is. The good news is, if you can really seek this out as an opportunity, if you can really see this as an opportunity to practice, bringing yourself back to center, having an awareness of what and how it is you're feeling, and understanding that there is a choice within every response to nurture calm, to move towards better feeling thoughts, to integrate what it is that you are feeling and then find practices and processes that allow you to deal with that in a constructive way, those skills are transferable. If you can practice that now, it will absolutely be of the highest benefit to your riding. If you can practice that now in a situation where essentially we have a megaphone going on about how it is we should feel, what it is we should fear, how, what it is we should be concerned about, if you can even bring yourself down a notch or two from that, you are growing your mental and emotional muscles in a way that will infinitely benefit you in the future. Do not see the experience of fear or anxiety as isolated to particular situations in your life. They are absolutely not isolated. If you are experiencing fear or anxiety in your riding, it may be that that is linked to a specific trauma. It may be that that is linked to a specific event or something that concerns you within your system in some way. But I will bet everything I have that that same experience is present somewhere else in your life. And this is why when we develop cornerstone habits, or when we really focus on something that is specific in our experience, such as riding, and when we develop skills in that area to be able to manage ourselves better for that particular thing, we notice that every other area of our life benefits, because this is not a singularly focused gig. The liberation occurs on a number of levels. And so right now, it might be that you don't have the chance or the opportunity to be working or practicing with your horse in the way that you would like to. However, if you can recognize that your ability to manage yourself in this situation will impact every other area of your life, and that when this situation is alleviated, so when we're not under the same pressure, when the isolation has, when that need for isolation has been removed, when you're back to some semblance of normal, then you will have you'll find yourself in a much more fortified state to be able to deal with what it is in front of you, because you've practiced those skills. So please hold on to that. Please start to practice them now. Please don't think that things like Joyride or the skills that I teach aren't available to you currently because you are not with your horse. That couldn't be further from the truth. We can start to do the work now. We can start to do the work now with the understanding that our experience doesn't operate exclusive to everything else that comes about in our lives. That we have the opportunity to work with this huge amount of fear, this huge amount of anxiety, this huge amount of worry that is circulating. That we have the choice about how it is that we want to respond. And that if we're finding ourselves moving into situations where it feels very much like our body taking over, like a trauma response, that there are the ways and means to work through that as well. And you can do that from the safety of your own home. And that it will absolutely 100% benefit you as soon as you're able to step back out into the arena. The second thing is practicing moving with intention. So I talked about in the last podcast, so it feels like 3 podcasts ago because I've done 2 bonus episodes since then. But if we go back to what I think is episode 46 from memory, I talked about how I am really using my intention as an anchor to move through my day, and that I see practices such as bravery, such as confidence, such as joy, not as destinations that I am arriving at, but practices that I step into. And this is exactly the same process that I work with my horses. So if I go out with Dee or I take Sausage or one of my other horses out to the arena, I will ask myself, how is it that I want to show up today? And what is it that my horse needs from me? And that might be they need me to be calm and confident. And so I practice that. I ask myself, what would calm look like? What would confidence look like? How would that inform my decisions? How would that inform my actions? And then I move in accordance with that. This is not about adding a layer of falsity to what lies beneath, meaning that if you are rumbling with concern and how you're presenting is moving in line with the kind of fake it till you make it approach. What happens then is what you're thinking, what you're feeling, and what you're projecting are all out of alignment. And your horse is always going to pick up on what you're feeling. They will recognize that incongruence as a lack of safety. And as a consequence, they take over feeling like they need to be on high alert because you're basically going to be missing stuff. You're not trustworthy in that space. So it's not about a layering. It's not about feigning confidence. It's not about feigning bravery or feigning joy. And that same situation applies now. It's about an integration. It's about recognizing that 2 things can coexist at the same time, that it's possible for me to feel concern and worry and to simultaneously draw on my competencies, to simultaneously recognize that there are strengths available to me that I can hook into that will allow me to move in the highest interests of myself and my horse. That skill we can practice right now. That skill we can practice whether or not we're in the arena. When I wake up in the morning, I ask myself, what is my intention? How is it that I want to show up today? How will that inform my decisions and actions? And when I use that muscle, when I step into that space, the next time I'm out there with my horse, I can ask myself the same questions, and my proficiency and my competency at being able to move in that way will be greatly heightened because of the practice I've put in prior. So hold on to those 2 things, guys. This is really, really important. The practice you have now, the opportunity you have now to practice dealing with amplified emotions that are out there around fear, anxiety, worry, concern, all of those will come back to support you when you are working with your horse. Learning to move with intention. This is a key skill as well. Integration, learning congruence. What is it that I'm feeling right now? How is it that I want to be? What can I simultaneously draw on, not to stuff something down or pretend it's not there, but to recognize that these 2 things can coexist at the same time. The third thing is to move with a plan. So I talked a lot about this in the last episode, but that was more about creating a routine in the bonus episode. If you haven't listened to that, please go back and check out the bonus episode around creating a routine, because I think it's really important to be doing right now for a number of reasons. But what I've seen a lot of is this tendency, to attach a sense of permanency to the situation that's happening right now. So we get fixed on this idea that things are never going to shift from this way. And it will be, of course, because change is inevitable, that it's not going to be the same as it was before. But the possibility exists that it's going to be better than it was before. We very much get attached to this idea that we are moving into something that is less than or not as good as it was before. And I think that comes from a tendency that we have as humans to be loss-focused as opposed to gain-focused, meaning that if I'm moving forward into the unknown and I don't know what that's going to look like, or I don't know what that looks like, that creates a huge amount of uncertainty within me. And the default response to that is to start to reflect back on what it is that we're going to lose. And of course, that causes us to grab and snatch and hold on to the things which give us a sense of stability and permanency, which all are inherently going to change. So what I invite you to do within this experience is practice stepping into uncertainty, practice stepping into the unknown, recognizing that the trust is not something that we gain from the outside, but the trust has to be something to do with trusting yourself, that is where everything originates from. I don't have to trust or be certain about the future, but I can trust and be certain about my ability to deal with whatever comes up. And understand that what it is that I'm stepping into might be more beautiful or better than what it is that I experienced before. And that possibility is just as real as the possibility that more of us are entertaining that it won't be. This shedding of skin is so important. We need to learn to shed skin. We need to learn to move with the flow of what's presenting and not resist it, because in the resistance we create suffering. In the resistance we create strain in our system which does not need to be there. This plan then, kind of got a little bit off track there, this plan there is allowing ourselves to move into a future-based place that is further out than the immediacy of what we're looking at right now. It might be that you go to a year, it might be that you go to 3 months. And the question that's probably going to come up as you do this is, well, I don't know the situation, there's so much uncertainty, I don't know this, and this. And that's fine. You're going to remind yourself that you're flexible. So just because you're sitting down to create a plan now doesn't mean that it's not going to change or that you're not able to change it. It just means that within the information that you have at the moment, this is how things are going to roll out. Actually, this is a reason why I don't work so much with goals anymore, because people get freaked out about the lack of certainty around them or the feeling of failure if they're not able to follow through on them for some reason. And what I want to remind you of is just because you write something down, it doesn't mean that it's solid. It doesn't mean that this is a pass-fail test or something is black and white in terms of it being laid out on the paper in front of you. But what it does mean is that you are able to reverse engineer your way back to where it is that you sit now and say, what is the smallest version of that I can practice right now? And the all-in pathway in Joyride, the very first pathway in Joyride, is where we do all of this work in really great detail. But for the moment, what I'd like you to think of is just outlining a plan for yourself, maybe for 3 months, maybe for 6, maybe for 12 months, and letting yourself hook into that picture, feeling gratitude for what is yet to become known to you, and then coming back, reversing your way back, recognizing what it is right now that's within your control and influence. And from that point saying, what is in relation to this dream or goal, what is the smallest version that I can practice right now? What is something that I can do that feeds into that might not be my ideal, that might be far removed from what it is I'd actually like to be doing, but still is something that I'm able to do right now. And then start to create a schedule around that with that particular thing slotted into your routine. Number 4 is breath work. This is something that we really do need to establish away from our horses, because it's the same situation that I highlighted in the first point, which is we don't want to be practicing something new to us. We don't want to be getting on board with a new skill or developing proficiency in something when all of the environmental factors are at their highest pressure point. So if you can get yourself into a good place, and we might actually do a breath work workshop together. That could be kind of a cool thing. I'm speaking out loud now. My thoughts are coming into my head. Well, I'm always speaking out loud. It's a podcast, but I mean, I'm thinking my thoughts out loud in terms of things which aren't really relevant, but maybe we'll do like a breathwork workshop together, and that can be something to practice. Cogs are turning. Yes, but breathwork, obviously so important. And I'll give you a little practice now that you may have heard from me before, but it is the 1-2 breath ratio. So if you think of, no, don't think of this. This is actually not something to think of. It's something to know. Your inhalation is linked to the sympathetic nervous system, so your flight-fight response. The exhalation is linked to the parasympathetic nervous system, so that relaxation response, if we think of it very simplistically. And what we're wanting to do in most instances is actually calm and restore the nervous system, which means we're wanting to be focusing more on the exhalation than on the inhalation. Consequently, the 1-2 breath ratio means that we are doubling the length of the exhalation in comparison to your inhalation. So if you were to take a breath in now and count maybe for 3 or 4 counts, so breathing in 1, 2, 3, 4, and then breathing out for the count of 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That is a breath ratio of 1-2. If you found that at the end of your exhalation, you are out of breath or feeling like you need to take a really urgent breath in, it will be that the ratio that we've chosen is just too long for your comfortable breath rate at the moment. There's no judgment around that. It's just that it's something that we can actually develop. So the more proficient you get with focused breath work, the easier it will become to develop an even and fluid breath that moves to a specific ratio. The practice then that I would like you to do to be able to develop your own breath proficiency is to listen to the meditation that I gave you in the bonus episodes from this last week just gone. And I would like you to go through that meditation. It takes about 10 minutes. And then at the end of the meditation, you're going to practice this 1-2 breath ratio. You're going to establish prior what a comfortable breath ratio looks like for you. I think most of us could easily do a count of 3 in and a count of 6 out. And I'd like you to run through 12 of those breaths, complete breaths. So a complete inhalation and a complete exhalation represents 1 round. 12 of those breaths at the end of your meditation. And that will start to establish for you a breath practice that you'll be able to use in the saddle, or you'll be able to use in the moments where you feel yourself really coming off center. And actually just engaging 2 or 3 of those breaths is obviously going to click you back down into an autonomic response. A great way of counting breaths, if you think, well, I don't want to be counting breaths at the same time as I'm concentrating on breaths, is if you look at the palm of your hand right now and you look at your fingers, the creases in your fingers are 12 creases. So you've got 3 on the little finger, 3 on the ring, 3 on the middle, and 3 on the index finger. And if you take your thumb, this is something that we do in meditation and in yoga, and you place the tip of your thumb on the bottom crease of your little finger. As you move through one complete breath round, you can move your thumb up to the middle crease and then to the top crease, and then so on and so forth until you've got all the way to the tip of the index finger, and you will have counted 12 breaths. So that's a little thing in there that you can use if you're finding yourself feeling overwhelmed by the idea of also counting to 12 while going through these breath ratios, and it just makes sure that you can really focus on the task at hand. The last thing, and I think this is a really, really important one. I know this is a really, really important one, and it's the first thing to go in situations where we feel pressurized, and that is our ability to be kind to ourselves. We so easily beat up on ourselves, and I know that shame, a lack of worthiness, a lack of feeling good enoughness is one of the scourges of modern times, but also something that I'm dealing with a lot with riders. Basically, the baseline concern that we're not good enough is, it's there for everyone, frankly. Like, I don't think I've met one person or worked with one person that didn't have that active in some shape or form. But in situations now where we're required to be more creative than usual, where we are needing to look after ourselves and where things are a little bit manic, it can be really easy to beat up on yourself. It can be really easy to think, why didn't I have this in place, or why didn't I do that, or this, that, and the other. Or if you're needing to do a complete 360 and life has turned upside down, you know, beating up on yourself can be a really easy place to go to. And what I've recognized is that the highest form of practice is the ability to practice coming back to center whilst being kind. And if you notice that the itty bitty shitty committee is operating with a higher degree of velocity than usual, then know that that's okay. Know that that's a product, again, of this amplification of everything that's happening right now, and that it is possible for you to observe that voice without buying into it and to utilize the skills, work with the breath, get on board with what you need to do to be able to restore nervous system calm, and remind yourself that you are totally worthy, that you're totally loved, that it's going to be okay, in that you have the resources within you that you need to be able to get through this, and that everything begins with kindness to yourself. It's the start point. So extend the same love, the same gratitude, the same kindness that we're being called on to extend to others, to yourself, because we need that right now. You need that right now. And the last thing you need is to be offside on your own team. So get on your own team, be kind to yourself, and engage in the practices that you need to restore wellness and to restore balance. I have a lot of free resources going right now. Listen to that meditation. Go on my website and sign up for Be the Wellness if you haven't done that already. Join Joyride if that's within your capacity, because we are really doing this work now. We're doing this work in a really empowering way. And so I invite you, if it appeals to you, and like I say, if that's within your means right now, to come and join me, because I'm really passionate about this. And I think that the more we can draw on each other, the stronger we can all get together. I hope that's useful to you. I think this is a really important conversation. And everything that we're able to do now in terms of managing our emotions, managing our mindset, this isn't futile. It's not a one-off. It doesn't only apply to this situation. This will benefit your partnership with your horse exponentially, because these are all skills we need to draw on when we're out there. These are all skills we need to use when we're riding, or when we're doing groundwork, or when we're doing in-hand work, when we're just interacting. So use it as an opportunity. Use it as a call from the universe to really step into the practices that support you, and to seek out the frameworks around you that support you also. All right, guys, much love to you. I would love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to get in touch. And if this episode has helped you, and you know someone else that might not be listening to it right now and you think it will help them, that would be amazing if you could share it. I'd be so appreciative. So until next time we talk, look after yourself, please. Much love. And if you want to jump onto my website, confidentrider.online, you can hook into the other things that are available to you right now to help you stay well and manifest calm. And I'll talk to you soon. Look after you, please.